In the misty hours before dawn on November 5, 1960, a white Ford pickup truck vanished into the Texas fog, leaving behind a twisted wreck in country music's newest superstar dead at age 35. But Johnny Horton had predicted his death weeks earlier, and the crash that killed him would expose Nashville's darkest secrets. The last person to see Johnny Horton alive was Merle Kilgore at the Skyline Club in Austin, the same venue where Hank Williams performed his final concert. Horton's parting words would haunt Nashville for decades. "Merle, I ain't gonna be around much longer. There's a man following me, and I know he's gonna kill me." Hours later, on a foggy stretch of Highway 79, a truck emerged from nowhere and slammed head-on into Horton's Cadillac. The truck driver, who gave his name as James Davis, vanished from the hospital before investigators could follow up. No James Davis matching his description was ever found. For months, Horton had been telling friends about vivid premonitions of his death. He just turned down a major record deal that would have tied him to one of Nashville's most powerful labels. His widow, Billie Jean, who had previously been married to Hank Williams, insisted the crash wasn't an accident. According to her, Johnny had discovered something during his last trip to Nashville that made him fear for his life. The investigation was suspiciously brief. Witnesses who initially reported seeing a second vehicle tailing Horton's Cadillac suddenly changed their stories. The morning after his death, a notebook found under the Skyline Club stage, filled with names and details about Nashville's drug trade, vanished before police could collect it. As dawn broke over the crash site, the Nashville machine was already working to bury more than just a rising star. In the office of Dr. Marcus Winfield, known throughout Music Row as the Tour Doctor, someone was frantically shredding documents that would have exposed the deadly grip that pills and prescriptions held over the industry's biggest names. But this was just the beginning. As we're about to discover, the dark web of addiction, control, and corruption that claimed Johnny Horton would reach into every corner of country music's golden age, leaving a trail of broken lives and buried secrets that still haunt Nashville today. That powerful man was Dr. Marcus Winfield, known throughout Nashville as the Tour Doctor. His name appeared on more prescription pads than sheet music in the 1950s, but his story began long before Strickland's tragedy. Back in 1947, when country music first hit the highways, nobody talked about what it really took to perform 300 shows a year. Imagine driving all night in a cramped Packard, pulling into a dusty parking lot at dawn, sleeping 2 hours in the back seat, then putting on a smile and a sequined suit to perform for 3 hours straight. Now imagine doing that every single day. The human body wasn't built for that kind of punishment, but the record labels didn't care. They had discovered that touring meant money, and lots of it. Enter Winfield and his miracle solution. Little yellow pills he called road medicine. They started innocently enough, something to help with the back pain from those long drives, something else to help sleep between shows, another to wake up fresh for the morning radio spot. But soon, every major star had their own personal rainbow of pills, each color coordinated to keep them functioning like well-oiled machines. The touring circuit became known as the medicine show among insiders, a dark joke that referenced both the old-time traveling performers and the chemical cocktails keeping modern stars on their feet. Artists would trade pills like baseball cards backstage, comparing which combinations worked best for which situations. Some managers started paying their performers in prescriptions rather than cash. By 1960, you couldn't book a major tour without a connection to one of Nashville's special doctors. They were as crucial to the industry as songwriters and producers. The labels kept them on retainer, disguising their salaries as medical consulting fees. These doctors didn't just write prescriptions, they designed custom combinations for each performer's needs. Need to sound energetic after 3 days without sleep? There was a pill for that. Need to calm your nerves before a television appearance? Another pill. But Winfield wasn't content with just being a prescription pad. He started attending industry meetings, weighing in on which artists could physically handle major tours. His medical recommendations could make or break careers. When a young female singer showed up at his office in 1962 complaining about tour exhaustion, she left with more than just a prescription. She carried a secret that would shake the foundations of Nashville's moral facade and expose an even darker side of country music's golden age. The young singer who left Dr. Winfield's office that day wasn't just any performer. She was Ellen Mae Cooper, Kitty Wells' backup vocalist. And what she discovered in Winfield's filing cabinet would give Wells the ammunition needed to shatter country music's suffocating moral code. Wells had already ruffled feathers with "It Wasn't God Who Made Honky-Tonk Angels." But what came next would make that controversy look tame. During a backstage conversation at the Ryman, Ellen Mae revealed to Wells that Winfield's records contained proof of Nashville's biggest stars living double lives. Married men with secret families in different cities, all facilitated by prescription papers and hushed payoffs. The information sparked something in Wells. She'd spent years watching female performers being held to impossible standards, while male stars flouted every rule in the book. Women couldn't perform in pants, couldn't tour without male chaperones, and certainly couldn't sing about real issues affecting their lives. Meanwhile, male performers were protected by the industry no matter what they did. Wells made a decision that would cost her every major sponsorship she had. She wrote "The Truth Ain't Pretty," a thinly veiled exposé of Nashville's hypocrisy. The song never explicitly named names, but everyone in the industry knew exactly who she was talking about. The first verse described a pill-popping preacher of country songs, while the second called out the defender of family values with 3 different wives. Radio stations refused to play it. The Opry threatened to cancel her membership, but Wells had anticipated this. She booked herself on a tour of smaller venues, performing the song night after night, watching it spread through word of mouth until even the industry couldn't contain it. Behind the scenes, Nashville's power brokers launched a smear campaign. They spread rumors about Wells' own personal life, claiming she was bitter and unstable. Several male artists recorded answer songs, painting her as a troublemaker trying to destroy good men's reputations. But their efforts backfired. Each attack only made Wells' message resonate more strongly with female audiences. The scandal forced several major stars into early retirement. 2 prominent label executives resigned. But more importantly, it cracked open the door for female artists to start telling their own truths. Within months, women across Nashville began writing songs that challenged the industry's double standards. Fan mail flooded in from women across the country, thanking Wells for finally saying what they'd all been thinking. But the real war was just beginning. As Wells celebrated her small victory, Porter Wagoner was about to demonstrate just how far the industry would go to maintain control over its female stars. His upcoming battle with a young Dolly Parton would expose the ugly truth about power, contracts, and ownership in country music. Porter Wagoner had carefully crafted his image as country music's gentleman host. His rhinestone suit sparkled almost as brightly as his television smile. But beneath that polished exterior lurked a man obsessed with control. In 1967, when a young Dolly Parton joined his show, nobody could have predicted the storm that would follow. The first signs of trouble appeared in the contracts. While other TV hosts typically signed their duet partners to 1-year agreements, Wagoner's contract with Parton spanned 7 years and claimed ownership of everything: her songs, her image, even her future solo earnings. More disturbing were the clauses about personal appearances, requiring Parton to attend private industry events at Wagoner's discretion. But Wagoner's iron grip extended beyond paperwork. He controlled which songs Parton could record, what she wore on stage, and who she could talk to backstage. According to former band members, he would fly into rages if she spoke to male performers without his permission. The situation grew so tense that other artists began calling his show Porter's Prison. The breaking point came in 1973 when Parton discovered Wagoner had been registering himself as co-writer on songs he'd never touched. This wasn't just about money. In Nashville, a songwriter's credits were their legacy. Wagoner had essentially been stealing pieces of Parton's life story, including Coat of Many Colors, her deeply personal tribute to her mother. The ensuing legal battle exposed a common practice in country music: powerful men using contracts to essentially own their female performers. Similar documents surfaced from other shows and labels, revealing a pattern of exploitation that had been going on for decades. Some contracts even included clauses about performers' personal relationships and marriage prospects. When Parton finally broke free, she didn't just walk away. She wrote "I Will Always Love You," a masterpiece of subtle revenge. The song's gentle lyrics masked a sharp message about the price of freedom in Nashville. Wagoner wouldn't see a penny from its success, a fact that haunted him as the song became one of the most profitable in country music history. But even as Parton celebrated her independence, another scandal was brewing. Down in Bakersfield, California, Western swing king Spade Klie was about to show the world just how dark country music's shadows could get. New Year's Eve, 1952. While Spade Klie was rising in California, country music's biggest star was about to take his last drive. Hank Williams lay in the back seat of his baby blue Cadillac, shivering despite the heavy overcoat draped across him. His driver, Charles Carr, had already noticed something wasn't right, but he had strict orders from the label. Get Hank to the show, no matter what. The truth was, Williams shouldn't have been touring at all. His personal physician had warned the label executives that their star was in no condition to perform. His spine, twisted by a chronic condition, required increasingly dangerous doses of morphine just to let him stand upright. But the machine couldn't stop. There were contracts to fulfill, tickets sold, promises made. Earlier that day, a Dr. Williams had never met before showed up at his hotel room. This mysterious physician, later discovered to be part of the same network as Dr. Winfield, administered a cocktail of vitamins and something he called traveling medicine. Within hours, Williams was barely conscious. What happened next remains one of country music's most debated mysteries. Some say Williams died in Tennessee, others in Virginia, and still others claim he took his last breath in West Virginia. The only certainty is that somewhere between Bristol and Oak Hill, country music's brightest star faded out. The industry's response proved more telling than the death itself. Instead of addressing the circumstances that led to Williams' death, label executives worked overtime to craft a mythology. They transformed a preventable tragedy into a romantic legend. The lonely star dying in the back of his Cadillac became country music's equivalent of James Dean. But the questions lingered. Why did the label insist on him performing when he was clearly ill? Who was the mystery doctor? And why did his records disappear? Most importantly, why did Charles Carr receive a brand new Cadillac just weeks after Williams' death? The investigation stalled before it began. Like Johnny Strickland's death years later, local authorities seemed surprisingly uninterested in digging deeper. The same network of industry fixers that would later protect Dr. Winfield had cut their teeth covering up the circumstances of Williams' death. More disturbing was how Williams' death set a precedent. It showed artists that they were replaceable. No star was too big to sacrifice for the bottom line. This lesson would echo through the decades, creating a culture where performers literally worked themselves to death, trying to maintain their spot in the industry. Meanwhile, back at the Grand Ole Opry, a practice was taking shape that would turn this unspoken threat into an institutional weapon. The Grand Ole Opry promoted itself as country music's family. But families don't typically make their members sign away their lives. By the mid-1950s, the Opry's membership contract had evolved into a document that would make a prison warden blush. The infamous Radius Clause prohibited performers from playing any venue within 150 miles of Nashville without Opry permission. For most artists, this meant surrendering control of their entire touring schedule to Opry management. The excuse was maintaining performance quality, but the real reason was more sinister. It gave the Opry leverage over every aspect of a performer's career. Consider Jimmy Martin's case. When he dared to book a local television appearance without permission in 1958, the Opry didn't just cancel his next performance, they erased him. His name vanished from promotional materials, his parking spot disappeared, and other performers were warned not to mention him on stage. Within months, radio stations mysteriously stopped playing his records. The Opry's power extended beyond Nashville's city limits. They maintained relationships with radio stations across the country, suggesting which artists should receive airplay and which should be forgotten. One wrong move could turn a rising star into a cautionary tale overnight. Behind the scenes, a complex web of informants kept Opry management aware of every performer's moves. Waitresses at local diners, hotel clerks, and even gas station attendants would report back about who was meeting whom, who was drinking too much, or who was complaining about management. Artists never knew who might be watching and reporting back. The most effective control came through the Opry's unwritten rules. Artists learned to read the subtle signals. A last-minute schedule change meant you'd offended someone important. A move from Saturday night to Friday afternoon meant you were on thin ice. Being scheduled after midnight was essentially a death sentence for your career. The system created an atmosphere of constant anxiety. Performers watched each other for signs of favor or disgrace, knowing their own futures hung on the whims of Opry management. Some artists started hiring protocol advisors, usually former Opry employees who could interpret the political undercurrents. This culture of control reached its peak in 1961 when rising star Ruby Falls refused to fire her manager, who had fallen out of favor with Opry leadership. Not only was she banned from the Opry, but her entire family was barred from attending shows as audience members. The message was clear: defy the Opry, and they wouldn't just end your career, they'd erase your existence. But while the Opry perfected psychological control, Spade Klie was about to demonstrate a far more brutal form of power over in California. While Nashville manipulated careers through contracts and politics, Spade Klie ruled his corner of country music through pure terror. The king of Western swing operated more like a mob boss than a bandleader, his power built on a foundation of violence that would ultimately expose country music's darkest chapter. In public, Klie was the smiling face of California country. His television show drew millions of viewers. His concerts packed the biggest ballrooms in Los Angeles, and his name appeared in newspaper society columns alongside Hollywood stars. But his band members knew a different Klie, a man whose explosive temper could turn a simple rehearsal into a crime scene. The warning signs were there from the beginning. Musicians would show up to performances with unexplained injuries. Female vocalists would suddenly quit, leaving town without collecting their final paycheck. Kulie's own wife, Ella May, began appearing in public wearing sunglasses and heavy makeup, even at night. Local police reports detailed numerous domestic disturbance calls to the Klie residence, all mysteriously dropped within days of filing. Industry insiders later admitted they developed an elaborate system to manage Kulie's episodes. Trusted stagehands would quickly usher away injured musicians through back exits. Makeup artists were kept on permanent retainer to cover bruises before television appearances. Record company lawyers maintained relationships with local police departments, ensuring complaints disappeared before reaching the press. The facade cracked on April 3, 1961. Klie had convinced himself that Ella May was part of a vast conspiracy involving secret religions and Hollywood communists. In front of their 14-year-old daughter, he beat Ella May to death, forcing the teenager to watch, saying, "This is what happens to people who double-cross Spade Klie." The industry's response revealed how deeply entrenched the culture of violence had become. Several prominent stars wrote letters to the judge requesting leniency, suggesting Ella May had somehow provoked her own murder. One label executive even testified that creative men sometimes need to blow off steam. Another suggested that the pressure of maintaining his television career had driven Klie to temporary insanity. But this time, the story couldn't be buried. The presence of Kulie's daughter as a witness, combined with the brutality of the crime, made it impossible for the industry fixers to make it disappear. When Klie was sentenced to life in prison, it marked the first time a major country star faced real consequences for domestic violence. The case forced country music to confront its long history of enabling abuse. From Nashville to Bakersfield, women began speaking out about similar experiences. But rather than address the problem, many in the industry focused on damage control, which led them straight into a confrontation with country music's most outspoken truth-teller, Loretta Lynn. In the wake of the Spade Klie conviction, Nashville's power brokers thought they could control the narrative around domestic violence. Then Loretta Lynn walked into Owen Bradley's studio with "Don't Come Home A-Drinkin' with Lovin' on Your Mind." The song wasn't just about a drunk husband, it was an anthem of female autonomy that scared the hell out of country music's old guard. Lynn's raw honesty about marital abuse and women's rights sent radio programmers into a panic, but she was just getting started. When Lynn followed up with "The Pill" in 1975, she crossed a line that even her staunchest supporters thought was untouchable. The song celebrated reproductive freedom at a time when birth control was still taboo in much of the South. More than 60 radio stations banned it immediately. The Opry suggested she take a break from performing, but Lynn had learned from Kitty Wells' playbook. She took her message directly to her audience, performing in smaller venues and women's gatherings. Fans would secretly pass copies of The Pill between themselves like contraband. Letters poured in from women sharing their own stories of abuse, control, and silent suffering. The industry's attempts to silence Lynn backfired spectacularly. Every banned song became an underground hit. Women would request the songs by code names at radio stations. Don't Come Home A-Drinkin' became that Saturday night song. The Pill was requested as the medicine song, a bitter irony given Nashville's history with prescription drugs. Lynn's defiance inspired a new generation of female artists to tackle controversial subjects. Suddenly, songs about divorce, abuse, and women's rights began slipping past radio censors. The old guard's grip on acceptable topics was weakening. But just as Lynn was breaking down barriers, Webb Pierce was about to remind everyone why country music's image needed protecting in the first place. His gaudy Nashville mansion would become ground zero for a scandal that threatened to destroy the genre's carefully crafted respectability. Just off Music Row sat Webb Pierce's idea of the American dream, a mansion featuring a guitar-shaped swimming pool with silver dollar coins embedded in the bottom. It wasn't just a home, it was a middle finger to Nashville's old money society, and it nearly started a civil war within country music. Pierce began charging tourists $1 to peek at his pool, transforming his residential street into a makeshift theme park. Tour buses would idle for hours, crowds would gather on neighboring lawns, and souvenir vendors set up shop on sidewalks. His neighbors, including many prominent Nashville executives, were livid. The situation escalated when Pierce added a shooting gallery and opened a gift shop in his garage. Country music's elite watched in horror as their exclusive neighborhood turned into what one columnist called a hillbilly circus. But Pierce wasn't just thumbing his nose at the neighbors. He was exposing the class divisions that Nashville's power brokers preferred to keep hidden. This wasn't just about noise complaints. Pierce's tourist trap revealed the uncomfortable truth about country music's identity crisis. While industry leaders were trying to present country as sophisticated entertainment, Pierce was embracing its carnival roots, complete with rhinestone suits and mechanical bulls. The legal battle that followed exposed deep rifts in the industry. Old guard performers supported Pierce's right to flaunt his success, while newer stars worried he was damaging their credibility. The controversy forced Nashville to confront an uncomfortable question. Could country music become respectable without losing its soul? As lawyers argued over property values and zoning laws, another story was developing, one that would make Pierce's pool party look tame by comparison. Jim Reeves's plane had just disappeared into a Tennessee storm, taking with it secrets that would haunt Nashville for decades. July 31st, 1964. Jim Reeves's private plane vanished into a thunderstorm over Tennessee. The crash itself was tragic enough, but what investigators found in the wreckage would tie together every scandal that had rocked country music's golden age. In Reeves's briefcase, alongside his pilot's license, lay a manila envelope stuffed with documents. There were prescription records matching Dr. Winfield's coding system, letters detailing the Opry's control over artists, and most explosively, financial records suggesting a massive network of payoffs keeping Nashville's darkest secrets buried. The investigation into Reeves's crash revealed more than mechanical failure. His toxicology report showed traces of the same mysterious pills found in Johnny Strickland's system. His flight plan included an unscheduled stop at a private airstrip owned by one of the industry fixers who'd helped cover up the Spade Klie case. But before these connections could be explored, the briefcase vanished from the evidence locker. The investigator who'd logged it was transferred to another state. Witnesses who'd seen Reeves meet with Porter Wagoner hours before the flight suddenly changed their stories. The crash marked the end of country music's golden age, not because of Reeves's death, but because of what died with him. The chance to expose the system that had claimed so many careers, reputations, and lives. Years later, a retiring Nashville detective would admit that the Reeves crash tied everything together. The pills, the contracts, the violence, and the cover-ups. But by then, the evidence was long gone, and the guilty parties had either died or become too powerful to touch. All that remained were the songs, each one a carefully coded message about the price of fame in country music's darkest hour. That mysterious call to the Grand Ole Opry in 1963 about Johnny Strickland's death wasn't just about one tragic night. It was the beginning of country music's Great Awakening, forcing an industry built on rhinestones and romance to finally face the darkness behind its sparkle. These 10 scandals didn't just change country music. They forced America to see the true cost of its favorite songs. Some say Nashville's never been the same since. What other secrets from country music's golden age haven't been told? If you know any stories about these scandals or have family connections to Nashville's history, share them in the comments below. Some of country's biggest mysteries were solved because viewers like you helped connect the dots.